Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 brought a lot of archetypes from the screen to the TCG, more than any other from the anime series. While some of these were extremely relevant, like Phantom Knights, Lunalight and Pendulum Magicians, some others were not so lucky. Decks like Battlewasp, Prediction Princess, or Yosenju's failed to make any splash in the game. Melodious fits into the latter category. Played by one of Arc 5's main characters, Yuzu Hiiragi, this music-inspired archetype has utterly failed to achieve any sort of relevance. So, why is that? And could that perhaps change in the future? Let's find out as we delve into these Musical Maestras. 2014's Duelist Alliance was no doubt one of the most impactful and influential sets of all time. It introduced decks such as Shaddolls and Burning Abyss, as well as the Pendulum Summoning mechanic. We also got Melodious. So yeah, lots of highs and a few lows. We start with just 3 cards, which formed a loose Protect the Fairies playstyle, which was just not good. First was Arya the Melodious Diva. A light fairy like the rest of the archetype, this is a level 4 monster that protects all of your Melodious monsters from battle destruction or from being targeted if it was first special summoned. This is certainly subpar, but it can set up a surprisingly strong lock by just controlling 2 of them. Although ways of dealing with it are much more common nowadays. Then there's Sonata the Melodious Diva. This is a level 3 which can special summon itself from your hand if you control Melodious monster, and then boost all of your fairy monsters by 500 attack and defense. While the attack increase effect is welcome, what sets this card apart is the ease of its summoning. Just slap it on a board without even activating, making for a great extender which isn't even limited to once per turn, which made the card a clear 3 of in every iteration of Melodious strategies. Last for the Duelist Alliance trio is Mozarta the Melodious Maestra. This level 8 Maestra allows you to, once per turn, special summon a light fairy from your hand, while locking you to only summoning light monsters for that turn. These 3 obviously fail to achieve relevance, but while a 3-card archetype isn't really expected to perform. This changed with the new challengers, with a big bunch of Melodious performers. For starters, we got Mozartra's counterpart, Chopina the Melodious Maestra. This level 7 can, once per turn, target and add a light fairy monster from your graveyard to your hand, while locking you out of non-light monster effects. This is decent since it can recover Sonata that you might have used for the tribute summon of Chopina, and then summon her back to further plays, or simply fetch another Melodious piece. And in the vein of Sonata, we have Canon the Melodious Diva. This has the same special summon effect as Sonata, but limited to once per turn. It can then target a Melodious monster to change its battle position once per turn. The battle position effect is completely irrelevant, but an additional extender is always welcome. Still, it being limited to a once per turn places this card clearly under Sonata as a worse extender. At level 5, we have Elegy the Melodious Diva. She grants your Melodious monsters protection from destruction by card effects, and if it was special summoned, boosts your fairy monsters by a whopping 300 attack. Quite obviously, the card lacked impact, but the lack of playables made it a must-play for lack of better options. The last monster's wave of support was Serenade the Melodious Diva. This level 4 can be treated as 2 tributes for the summon of a fairy monster. Also, when special summoned, it gives you an additional normal summon of a Melodious monster that turn. Clearly designed to work with Mozarta and Chopina, this gave the deck a bit of an objective, even if that objective was not really all that good. This wave also gave us what's probably Melodious's best card, First Movement Solo. This normal spell allows you to summon a level 4 or lower Melodious monster from your hand or deck if you control no monsters, while also locking you to only summoning Melodious monsters that turn. Still, while clearly a super strong effect, there were just no good cards to summon with it. No Melodious monsters had a proactive effect on summon, and that would take a long time to change. At this point, the deck was still incomplete and still kinda bad. Your end board would just be 2 or 3 Melodious monsters which have a bit of protection and decently sized bodies, but no sort of interaction. The deck would get a much needed boost with Cross Souls, where we got our first 3 Melodious fusions, together with some other cards. First is Crystal Rose. This card references a pretty big character moment in the Arc 5 anime being a fusion of sorts between Melodious and Gem Knights, as a way of representing the bond between those decks' respective duelists. However, it does a lot more for Gem Knights than it does for Melodious, so we'll be skipping over this one. More importantly, we got Soprano the Melodious Songstress. This level 4 can, on special summon, return a Melodious monster from your graveyard to your hand. This is already pretty good, but it can also, once per turn, fusion summon a Melodious monster using monsters you control. So, what are you summoning with this? Well, we got a total of 3 options. First is Schuberta the Melodious Maestra, which requires 2 Melodious monsters and has a surprisingly strong effect, especially during the current modern format. As a quick effect, it can target and banish up to 3 cards in any graveyard, then gaining 200 attack for each of them. While strong, sadly this effect can only be used once while Schuberta is face up on the field. Still, a pretty good interrupt to bring out, especially against graveyard-based stacks like Telements or Fire Kings. There's also Bloom Prima the Melodious Choir, requiring a Melodious Maestra monster and any number of other Melodious monsters. She gains 300 attack for each monster used for a fusion summon, boosting her tiny 1900 attack to pretty big numbers quickly, which works with her additional effect to attack twice per battle phase, which combined with the Melodious attack boost makes for some scary battle phases. And if your opponent ever manages to send her to the graveyard, she can just recover any Melodious monster from your grave. The last fusion we received for a while was Bloom Diva the Melodious Choir, requiring a Melodious Maestra and Melodious, and showcasing a whopping 1000 attack. This was Melodious's boss monster for a good while. By itself, it cannot be destroyed by battle-like artifacts, and nullifies any battle damage you take involving her. Furthermore, if she battles any special summon monster, she'll deal damage to your opponent equal to the difference in their original attack and destroy that monster. This was pretty mediocre, all things considered. Yeah, it was kind of hard to out, but not really. Yeah, it could deal a bunch of damage, but not really. All in all, these cards were a big boon for the archetype, even while also getting Melodious Illusion, a subpar trap card which gives Melodious monsters immunity to spells and traps for a turn, and the ability to attack twice, which is not an effect that justifies playing an unsearchable trap that gives some bad protection. A bit later on, we got Clash of Rebellions, a set which included a bunch of crazy cards and also a few not so crazy Melodious cards. A set of 4 monsters which did very little to help the deck's playability. Opera, the Melodious Diva, is a level 4 with a beefy 2300 attack, which cannot attack near the turn it's normal summoned or flip face up. If it were to be sent to the grave as fusion material, it gives all your Melodious monsters immunity to destruction. This card isn't that great. It's big, yes, but not much else. Your Melodious fusions already protect themselves, and Arya, the Melodious Diva, also granted protection for those who don't have it built in. All in all, possibly the worst of the Melodious monsters. Tam Tam, the Melodious Diva, is a level 4 which searches a polymerization special summon, and uses material for a fusion, can decrease the attack of a Melodious by 500 to burn your opponent by the same amount. This card is okay, in the sense that it grants you a different way of fusing other than Soprano, but makes you run the original polymerization, which can be clunky, so run it at your risk. Score the Melodious Diva is a level 2 for that 6 sprite synergy, and is essentially just Karibo. Discard from your hand to make the attack of opponent's battling monster 0. This effect is neat, but not super good in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Though when this was released in Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links, the power level of this hand trap effect was actually really good. But that's not saying much considering the lower power level of Duel Links. You don't really have a good search in the archetype, and between your attack boost and Bloom Diva the Melodious Choir, you shouldn't have any issues beating over your opponent's guys. The last Melodious card we received for a long while was Solo the Melodious Songstress. This level 4 can special summon herself from your hand if your opponent controls a monster and you don't. Then, if destroyed by battle, it summons any Melodious monster from your deck. This is actually pretty decent. Or it would be if First Movement Solo didn't completely clash with it. First Movement Solo is clearly better, so to pick between these two, the decision is clear. And so that was it. The deck was complete, at least for now. We'd have to wait for Link summoning in 2018 Soul Fusion to get our next card in Ostinato. This normal spell can only be activated if you don't control any monsters, and then allows you to fusion summon a Melodious monster from your extra deck by using materials from your hand or deck, destroying it during the end phase, and then summoning back its materials. And that's 3 cards that require you to control no monsters to work. Though, Ostinato is completely nuts. If you know Branded Fusion, this is the same thing but on steroids. No restriction on what else you can do in your turn, and effectively summoning 2 monsters from your deck during the end phase. But then again, it clashes with First Movement Solo really hard, making the deck's entire strategy a bit clunky. But hey, even if they do conflict with each other, you can't really complain about having too many crazy cards like these two. A few months after Ostinato, we got a Link monster pretty much out of nowhere. Bloom Harmonist, the Melodious Composer, is a Link 2 with downward pointing arrows, which requires 2 fairy monsters to be Link summoned. On Link Summon, you can discard 1 card to special summon 2 Melodious monsters from your deck to the zones this card points to, while also locking to only some Melodious monsters for that turn. Then, if a monster she points to battles, it locks your opponent out of effects during that battle. This card is actually really good. I don't think I need to tell you why a Link 2 that refunds herself by summoning any 2 monsters from your deck is good. The card is the centerpiece of the archetype for a reason, giving you something to do with all the swarming the deck is capable of, and allowing you to access any Melodious you could ever want. Still, the rest of the deck was so subpar that the addition of this crazy Link monster did little to grant the deck results. And for a couple of years, that was it. Until Power of the Elements. Probably the best out of all time gave us Brilliant Rose, which was alright. A counterpart to Crystal Rose, which actually helps Melodious, being able to summon itself by discarding a Melodious card. Then has the same effect as Crystal Rose on the field, being able to send a Melodious or Gem Knight monster from extra deck to the graveyard to copy its name, type, and attribute. This card is alright, but honestly helps Gem Knight a whole lot more than Melodious again. And so Melodious was done. The archetype complete. Condemned to forever be pack filler you could do nothing with. until Konami decided to release like 3 busted core booster sets in a row. Age of Overload is clearly an extremely good set, but not quite relevant for all 4 Melodious players. Phantom Nightmare gave us ban-worthy cards like Promethean Princess, Bestower of Flames, but didn't help the Melodious players, now down to only 3 of them. But they wept, and Konami answered. Legacy Destruction released in January for the OCG, and featured a bunch of support for anime archetypes, as well as new ones. What we care about, however, are the best Melodious cards ever released. A total of 5 cards came with this. 2 main deck Pendulum monsters, a spell, and 2 fusions. Firstly, we have Couplet the Melodious Songstress, a level 5 light pendulum with a 9 scale. For its pendulum effect, it locks you into only pendulum summoning light monsters. But most importantly, if you only control Melodious monsters, she allows you to search for Melodious spell or trap once per turn. Then, as a monster, she can reveal herself from your hand to spell to summon a level 4 or lower Melodious monster from your hand or graveyard. On top of that, if you fusion summon a Melodious while she's face up in your extra deck, she can place herself in your pendulum scale. This is already better than all of the past Melodious cards put together. But things get better. Refrain the Melodious Songstress is a level 4 pendulum with a scale of 1. When in the pendulum scale, she can target Melodious fusion you control to send a Melodious monster from your deck to the grave, and increase that fusion monster's attack by 200 for each level the sent monster had. This is pretty good, as it gives you graveyard setup while also facilitating the battle phase obliteration the deck seeks to achieve. And while this is alright, she really shines as a monster. As on summon, she can search for any Melodious monster and add it to your hand. She then has the same effect as Couplet, placing herself in the pendulum scale if a fusion monster is summoned. The deck's biggest weakness is the inability to search for anything, and this card wonderfully fixes that. Able to search for extenders in Sonata or Serenade, or fusion plays with Soprano. But you might have realized the deck still only had like 1.5 ways to fusion summon, which is meant to be the deck's focus. This changed with their new normal spell, Melodious Concerto, which lets you fusion summon a fairy monster using monsters from your hand, field, or pendulum zone as materials. Then, if a Melodious fusion monster is sent to the grave, you can place Concerto on the bottom of your deck and draw a card. It's refreshing to see a good fusion spell release recently that doesn't just let you fusion summon using materials from your deck. Concerto is particularly useful because of the ability to use Songstress, Couplet, and Refrain while treated as spells and immediately bring them back thanks to their own effects. Still, since it recycled itself and is also searchable, it's mostly just a one-of. Lastly, we got 2 fusion monsters. First, Baccha the Melodious Maestra. This level 7 requires 2 Melodious monsters and grants you Melodious fusion monsters immunity to effect negation. Most importantly, when Baccha is special summoned, you get to special summon Melodious straight from your deck. And on top of that, when she's sent to the graveyard, she revives a Melodious in defense position except herself. This card's nuts. Straight up getting any Melodious monster from your deck on fusion summon, and summoning one back when sent to the grave, like for another fusion summon or for the link summon of Bloom Harmonious. Certainly a truly powerful card. Last but not least, we have the level 8 Flowering Étoile, the Melodious Grand Choir. She requires a Melodious Maestra monster and 2 other Melodious monsters as materials. As a quick effect, she can banish any number of Melodious monsters you control until the end phase, to then non-target return the same number of your opponent's cards. Then, if she leaves the field because of an opponent's card, she can summon any Melodious monster from your deck or extra deck. Finally, the Melodious deck has a good monster to summon which has interaction during your opponent's turn. And now the deck is actually complete. So, what has it achieved? Well, for 99% of its existence, nothing. The deck simply lacked any kind of relevance. The engine was bad, and the end boards were even worse. The tools you had access to were just subpar, and there was no real reason to justify putting the effort to get good with the deck, since the cards themselves were just mediocre. Even if you are the greatest player in the world, there's only so much you can do. Some cards had potential, sure, like First Movement Solo and Sonata the Melodious Diva, but you just had nothing to do with them. Later waves of support helped a little to remedy this, and the fact that the 2 strongest cards the deck had access to both required you to control no monsters is both funny and sad. However, there is light at the end of the tunnel. The last wave of support the deck received in Legacy Destruction somehow managed to make the deck actually relevant. The consistency of the new engine and the sheer power of cards like Ostinato have made Melodious one of the better rogue decks you can play in the OCG, even winning a few events. The deck is also extremely budget friendly, even if First Movement Solo has shot up in prices since it has no reprints and is a 3-of in the deck. So yeah, until now the deck only achieved some relevance in Duel Links as a budget deck, but this has finally changed. Whether or not that impact translates to the TCG is still unknown, but it seems like Melodious might finally be out of the deep bog of failed archetypes, at least for a while. So that's it for today. Melodious is certainly interesting as a deck, which might finally have some time in the limelight. Any ideas on what archetypes we should cover next? Leave a comment down below and we'll be seeing you next time.